Hello everybody. For this video, I'd like to demonstrate how to vinyl wrap a small and complex object using just a single piece of vinyl. If you look on the table here, I've got a couple pieces. This one here is already finished. You can see it's got a lot of curves to it. It's not an easy piece to wrap. It turned out okay using a single piece of 3M 1080 vinyl. What I'm going to demonstrate is kind of taking this other piece here, and we're going to go ahead and cover that in vinyl. We're going to start with the top side and flip it around and do the other side. The curves are very complex in it, which makes it very difficult to wrap, and it's kind of a visible piece, so we want to make sure that we're not putting a lot of seams or anything in there. The bottom piece here is a piece that I've already wrapped, and it went okay. I kind of used it as a learning piece. The vinyls on there is a single piece. There's no seams. And really it's a fairly easy thing to be able to do. Now, if you take a look right there, I did manage to hit it with a torch a little too much. The 1080 is really supposed to be used with a heat gun, not a torch, so you just have to be a little more careful than I was if you're going to torch it. But overall, it's pretty easy to do, and I'm going to go ahead and demonstrate that here in this video for you. So to start out, here are basically all the materials that I'm going to need for this job. I have obviously the piece I'm going to wrap, a nice sharp X-Acto knife, my squeegee. This one's getting a little long in the tooth. You can see it's starting to, the felt's starting to wear out, but for this job it will work fine. I've got my my torch again with the 3M 1080. You really want to use a heat gun, but the torch will get you done in a pinch. And then I have the wrap itself. This is just a leftover piece from doing the rest of the bike, so it's kind of oddly shaped. I mean, honestly, it's kind of a piece that you'd wind up throwing away anyway. But in this case, move that out of the way. Set this down here. In this case, this piece is going to fit on here nicely, and we'll be able to use up kind of this extra piece. So the first thing I want to do is I do want to kind of trim this down a little bit. I don't want to trim it too much. That's a mistake that that I make all the time, and I think it's a very common mistake. Is you look at this and you start to trim it, and then as you start to stretch and start to fit this this vinyl on here, you wind up finding that you've trimmed a little too much, and you just don't have what you need. Because as we put this on, we're going to be twisting and stretching and twisting and stretching, so it kind of looks like it's flat on here, and these ends are just going to kind of get, you know, bounced up onto the, wrapped up onto the side. But in actuality, because of the way we're going to be pulling and twisting and turning as we apply it, we just need to be a little bit careful. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm actually not going to try to trim any of this off just yet. We're going to go ahead and start applying first, and then we'll trim off later. So the first thing we're going to need to do is we're going to need to get at least a portion of this wrap opened up. What we're going to do, we're going to start on this end, and we're going to start with the top. Now this has already been prepped, so I've wiped it down with some alcohol, denatured alcohol, to get it all good and clean. Obviously I washed it first, then wiped it down with some alcohol to get it good and clean so that we'll get good adhesion. You can use an adhesion primer on this if you find it necessary. With this piece, this is a friction fit onto the fairing of the motorcycle. So by making sure that we have plenty of wrap that's pushed up into here, when we friction fit this on, it's going to hold that wrap. So I don't really feel that there's an adhesion primer is necessary for this job. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to position this on here. I think it's best when we start, we can kind of start closer to the edge as opposed to the middle. That'll give us a little more room to play with. So I want to try to get the piece itself positioned sort of in the middle, and the end can be pretty close to the edge. So I'm going to try it right here. And because of that, I am going to go ahead and I'm going to take some of this off, and I'm going to take it off right here, like that, just to give myself a good starting point. So the first thing I want to do is I'm going to pull some of the backing off of the wrap, but not all of it. So I'm going to go ahead and grab it right here and just kind of score the wrap a little bit, because this is really what I want to take off. So I'm just lightly scoring the back of it. And now we pull the backing off. Now, come down here. So it's not a perfect cut here, but that's okay. It doesn't really need to be perfect. Pull that out. Now we can begin. So I'm going to get this here. I'm going to mount that right in that area. And now we're going to flip it over. Now the key here is I want it on this back piece first. And I want that to be good and flat and have no bubbles in it. And that's what we've got. So that's, of course, the easy part. Like that. All right, now we need to continue along the path here. So I'm going to score this a little bit more. Just be careful as you're scoring the backing that you're going very lightly on that backing. You don't want to cut all the way through to the vinyl. We can pull it off, re-stick it. The key is keeping everything good and clean. All right, so I got a little more of the vinyl on. So now if we look at this, we can see we are definitely not sticking correctly. See, we got a lot of bubbles in there, wrinkles actually. So we're going to go ahead and I'm holding it on the bottom like this, and then I'm grabbing it up here and I'm pulling it tight right along there, and there we are. So now that piece is good to go. Now right here, the paper didn't come off the way I had expected, but that's all right. We'll just grab it right down here and we'll pull back some more. There we are. Tear that off. Good. And we want to make sure we get this end on as well, so we'll pull that back and tear that off. There. Now flip it over again. And there we go. So now we have good and flat all along there, and all the way up to here, and all the way around. So at this point, we have that surface on, and it is good. So the back surface is on. Now we need to work with getting the sides. Now, this will be a little difficult because we have a very small piece that we're working with a lot of bends to it. So the good news is smaller pieces with bends tend to be a little bit easier than large bends, just because you get a little more material to work with. You don't have, well actually I guess really it's that you have less material to work with. So when you start to pull and stretch to get around these bends, you're over and done with, as opposed to dealing with a large radius on a larger car surface or motorcycle surface, for example, where you've got to keep stretching to keep following this bend. Once we're around this, I mean, this is all we have to deal with in terms of extra material. So we'll start over here, and we're just going to pull this tight and get a good starting point. Right. Now, this is just a matter of taking this and pulling. So at this point, we can go ahead and trim some of this to make it a little easier to work with. So we have a little better idea for how this is going to follow. So I'm going to trim that off there. I always save these scraps, you never know. Something like that's going to come in handy. All right. Now we're going to start off pretty straight along here, so I'll start off pretty easy. I'm going to get this down here. All right. So we'll start off with a couple little wrinkles right here, right at the start, which is okay. Sometimes we can just go ahead and take and pull those wrinkles out. So by reaching around over here and grabbing this like that, we'll start to take those wrinkles out of it. If we can't get the wrinkles out just by pulling on it and pressing on it, we can always hit it with just a little bit of torch, a little bit of heat. All right. we're starting to get into that bend right there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give it just the tiniest bit of heat. Right? Just like that. That's it. Just a little heat. Just enough to make it kind of soft and malleable. That will bring it around. Like that. There we go. Now, we've got a little bit of a wrinkle right here we need to take out. So we come over here, I'm going to pull it up. I'm going to see if we can just push that wrinkle out without having to heat it, and it looks like yes, we can. So, there. Here, squeegee a little bit. There. All right, now let's look at what we've done to the other side. So at the same time, we've been putting pressure on the other side just as course of doing it, and we actually have gotten that fairly good as well. So again, we're just going to kind of squeeze it and work it with our thumbs. Just kind of push it out a little bit like that. Now we're starting to get into this bend, so we get a little wrinkle there. So we're going to pull this up and pull it off of there. I'm going to give it just the tiniest bit of heat. Again, just super well there. Just enough. See how it moves just a little bit there? And with that heat, we'll be able to bring the wrap around. Now I don't want to work that side too much. I want to focus here on this side of it. But I do want to make sure, and the main reason I'm stopping there to look at the other side is to make sure I'm not, as I'm gripping it, putting any major wrinkles on the other side that are going to be a lot of work to get out later. All right, so we're starting on this first curve, and you can see it's starting to bunch up. As it starts to bunch up, again, just a little bit of heat, not much, tiny little bit. If you heat it too much, a couple things can happen. Number one, you can actually burn the vinyl, which doesn't look good. The other thing that'll happen is you can make it a little too hot, which means you'll start to pull on it and it gets a little too thin and you'll put a hole in it. And then you got to start over. A little bit of heat. You can see how putting a little bit of heat on that kind of relaxes it and it lets us stretch it out. So we're just kind of stretching it out. Just relax it and stretch it out. Just working it with my thumbs here. Tiniest little bit of heat. I just want to get that all worked out. Alright, now I'm getting a little bit of an air bubble right there. So I'm just going to hit it with the squeegee. Will that work? Nope, the squeegee's not getting it. So we'll just lift it there. Alright, now we're starting to get a little bit much to deal with here in terms of the vinyl. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to pull this back. And then I'm going to tear it right here. Okay? So here's what I've got. I've got that much. I'm going to take this and I'm going to fold it over very carefully. Now it may wind up sticking to the other side. That's kind of okay. I'm going to take this, fold it over, get it good here. Basically what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to stretch this across to the other side because this part of the surface right here will be somewhat visible, so it still needs to have a good look along there. And then I want to push it down and in. Once it's down and in, we don't necessarily care too much what it looks like in there. So what I can do is once I've pushed it down in there, I can get my knife in there and cut the vinyl loose. Now you see how it is kind of not wanting to stick to the inside. So it's a little different surface on the inside, not prepped as well. Very hard to prep the inside. You can. Takes a little bit extra time. But when we attach this, it becomes a bit of a friction fit. So we don't have to worry about it quite so much in this application. So we'll go ahead and we're going to cut that there. And then we're going to pull this up here. Take that piece of vinyl out. hit this with our squeegee. And push that down in there, like that. There. Now, it's a mess on the inside, but again, that's okay because it's going to friction fit on the inside of the, or on the outside of the fairing. All right. So with that done, we can kind of continue along a little bit. It gives us a little bit more breathing room here. The one thing we need to be careful of is as we go through here, that was kind of a close shot. We want to be careful that we don't trim this too close because you're going to need more than it really looks like to get it to wrap way down in there. We want it way down in there. The other thing that we need to be careful of is as we're going to be pulling on this, if we cut too close to where we're going to be pulling and have a cut like this, as we start pulling, that cut, that tear is going to spread. So we do need to be careful about putting too many cuts out there or putting the cuts too close to where we're working. All right, so let's get back to this. Now that that's squared away up there. All right, now there's a little bit of a bubble right here, but this bubble is actually, there's actually something underneath there, so the surface isn't perfectly smooth, and that's what we're running into right there. So we're just going to kind of leave that and let it go. And we're going to come around to here. So we've got this wrinkle to deal with, and you see how it's starting to bunch up right there. So what we need to do is we need to be pulling it out this way. So you know the drill. Just a little bit of heat. That wrinkle's taken out. With a little bit of heat and some pulling, that'll come right around the radius and the wrinkles will come out. Unfortunately, in order to be able to do that, you kind of have to manipulate it, and it's kind of happening off camera a little bit. After pulling it like that, you can kind of see the results. So we've got that. Now, I'm going to go ahead and make sure I get this brought over. So what we're doing is we're just working a little bit at a time. I'm going to fold that back so it stops sticking. There we are. We're just working a little bit at a time, a little bit at a time. Now I'm going to go ahead and come in here. I'm going to take some of this off because I don't think we need all of this. And again, it's really easy to get in there and start cutting more than you need to cut. So I realize it can be a little inconvenient dealing with a ton of extra vinyl and trying to manhandle it that way, you know, woman handle it. But it's getting a little tight, so we'll loosen it up with a little heat, and voila! That'll pull right over there, like that, like that. All right, so this is coming out pretty nice. Okay, now again, we're starting to get into this. So I'm going to take some of this material off. I want to keep a super wide berth on this. But you need to go up the red, right? So I'll go over here. Starting to bunch up as we get down to this end of it. So you can see right here, we are super tight. So it's time to kind of work on this a little bit. Again, we need to trim out some material. So we're going to take this and we're going to kind of finish up on this. This right here, like so. That's heat. So stretch that over. All right, I'll take some of that. Loosen it up. Just don't loosen it up too much. Don't want to burn it. Avoid that. loosen this up so that it'll go around this bend, and it will. It just has to be persuaded. So this is a very, very, very tight radius bend. Now here's the other problem. I'm doing this on the other side, so I'm going to stop as I feel this. I want to stretch this out. All right, we're going to need some heat over here. No problem on both the inside and the outside.
So basically, I'm going to sit here and mutter to myself while I work. But essentially, what I'm doing here and what I'm noticing is that it's really bunching up around the radius, right? You have your inside radius, you have your outside radius, and that outside radius is bunching up. This is what I'm trying to take care of here. So applying a little bit of heat to the outside, and then pulling it and stretching it. So I'm stretching it out and forward, kind of two directions at once, and then smoothing it with my thumb there, as you can see. And slowly but surely, it's pulling the wrinkles out and pulling the vinyl forward as the vinyl stretches out. So getting in there and working with that corner, it's just pulling a little bit here and there. What I'm finding here is that there's a little too much material on the outside to really be able to get a good hold on it and really be able to get my fingers all the way around it. So I'm going to take a little bit more off. And again, you just got to be so careful when you're cutting bits off that you don't cut it too close. Now, and by bending it over, or pulling it over, and attaching it to the other side like that so that it can get the groove portion put together, it really helps to keep the form on the outside and keep it from wrinkling. So that is part of pulling it tight, is being able to wrap it around itself there.
So this really helps to lock it in place when I bring it around like this. There we are. There. Okay. Pretty close on this, so I'm going to pull a little cut to make it a little easier to work with. Now, I'm leaving on a lot of material because I don't want to shortchange myself. Okay. that all the way off. There. Let's see how much I can do. Whoa! See, that was too much. That was a little too close. I got a little burn on it. And you can see I had a little burn through right there. So, like I said, you got to be careful with that.
There's a little bit of camera trickery going on here. I inadvertently was working on this outside the frame of the camera, so what you didn't see is I gave it a little bit of extra heat to it, and I measured around the side to see how deep it would have to go, how much vinyl would have to get into that groove, and I went ahead and I cut that a little bit to take some of the pressure off by reducing the amount of material that was out there.
The downside is I can feel it really tearing here. Really, yeah, see, it is tearing a lot. I'm running a big risk of that tear coming all the way down. So I got to get some heat into this piece. There.
Again, I apologize for this being a little off camera here, out of the frame, but basically just putting a little more heat into it and bringing it around. I cut it a little too close, and that tear started to develop as I was putting pressure on it. So it's starting to tear around there, so you kind of have to grab it and hold the part where it's torn so it won't tear anymore, and then stretch the rest of the vinyl around.
This around here. That.
From here, it's just a matter of pulling and twisting and bringing the vinyl around. And so the last little bit here is really just to grab that last little piece
There.
and pull it around. That's the finished piece. One piece of vinyl all the way around, and a completed trim piece for a motorcycle.